G'day everyone, welcome to today's lesson. My name is Jaden Gunn and I'll be teaching you today some foundational bird photography skills to hopefully set you on your way to getting some great shots. Now some of you may be thinking, I recognise this guy. Well, I am actually in fact the guy who discovered that drop bears do exist. Or perhaps some of you recognise me from my award-winning photography. That's right, I've awarded myself a few scratch and sniff stickers over the years, with grape definitely being my highest accolade. Pretty cool. So what we're going to focus on today is capturing three species. First is going to be a spotted pardalote. Now for them we're going to require a bird call, so we're going to have to call them down. That's going to be method one of photographing birds. Method two is going to be using a bird hide. Now what we're going to be photographing there is black falcons, but I'm going to show you a range of birds of prey species there. And third is going to be the glossy black cockatoo, my personal favourite species. And for them we're going to actually have to track them through the bush, which is going to require us to have knowledge of their call and be able to recognise their call. So how about we go out and get ourselves into the bush, shall we? Oh, that's better. So right now we're in Cynimla National Park, and about 27 kilometres behind me is Carra, New South Wales, which is where I live. Now the first thing I want to do before we get started is just pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, of the Wiradjuri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. Let's get started on that lesson, shall we? Now before we go running off into the forest willy-nilly, I just wanted to take a bit of time to discuss how important it is to actually do a little bit of research and understand the species you're looking for before you go looking for them. This will only maximise your chance of finding the species and ensure that you get the shots that you're after. Now this here's a great place to start. This is the Australian Bird Guide. It's a fantastic resource, jam-packed full of detailed descriptions and beautiful illustrations on all Australian native species, as well as a few vagrant species too. Now, as we all know, Google is another great resource. It's great for finding out your finer details like your species ecology, their diet, their breeding behaviour, and exactly on the map where to find them. Now, while it's important to understand how to identify a species as well as find it, I also find it crucial to be able to find a species by ear. So a great place to start for this is the website Xenocanto, spelled Xenocanto, and this website is a massive archive of species from all over the globe, all of which the calls are free to download, and we'll be using some later on today.
Now I was going to quickly run you through camera mode and settings. We're going to be shooting on a manual mode today, which allows us to change each individual settings to suit the conditions of the day and the species that we're photographing. I recommend this setting for all wildlife photography because the auto setting doesn't seem to take movement into account and undercalculates the shutter speed, which causes a blurred image. Now, first setting we're going to talk about is our shutter speed. Now the shutter speed is the amount of time light is hitting the sensor. So a faster shutter speed is less light hitting the sensor, but it allows you to freeze a subject. So for example, a bird in flight, we'd use a high shutter speed, and a low shutter speed allows for photographing in darker conditions. It also brings more detail into the image as it brings more light. However, if the subject moves, then you tend to blur the image. Now our next setting is aperture, and aperture is the wideness of the lens, so of the opening of the lens, sorry. So a wide opening of the lens allows for more light, and a tighter opening of the lens, a high aperture, allows for less light. Now a low aperture setting tends to give you a nice blurred background, and a high aperture setting adds more depth and more detail in the background of an image. Now our next setting we're going to discuss is going to be ISO. Now ISO is light sensitivity. You tend to use a low ISO for light conditions in sunny days, and a higher ISO for darker conditions. I wouldn't recommend going over 1000 because you tend to get noise, which we'll discuss in the editing tutorial. And that's a basic run through of camera settings. So now we'll go discuss our gear.
We're currently filming off my first DSLR camera, which is a Nikon D5500. They're a great first camera. They take some beautiful pictures. They're very affordable and they're very easy to use. Now the camera we're going to be photographing with today is a Canon EOS 80D. Now they're a great camera as well. They're a mid-range camera, a step before you get to your professional full-frame 5Ds and your top-of-the-range 1DXs. Now I know we don't all have DSLR, so alternatively you can use your mobile phone. And mobile phones are great for beginning photography. A lot of mobile phones have your advanced settings in them nowadays, so you can actually have a little look through and see if yours does. And as well, we're going to be doing a bit of editing later on. Now, I'm hoping that a lot of you are introduced to your basic editing skills just from taking them bomb selfies, so we should be pretty safe there. Now, this is a Canon zoom lens, a 100 to 400 millimeter lens. It's great for getting close to a species without actually getting too close to it. The point being, we don't want to disturb the animal we're trying to photograph, and we're trying to capture its natural behavior in its natural habitat, which is often where your best shots come from, unless you're trying to capture, say, a portrait shot where the bird's looking straight down the lens and it practically takes up the whole image. Now, we're going to go set up some speakers for our pardalotes. Let's go and do that. We're going to go get some photos. So I've set up the JBL Flip Bluetooth speaker. It's what we're going to be using to call down the spotted pardalotes, our first species of the day. And I'm going to go ahead and click play on this just to give you an example of their call. Caw-caw! No, I'm kidding. That was just a little bamboozle, a little stitcherino. I'm going to actually click play now. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this off into the bush here. There's a large granite formation with a large eucalyptus tree next to it where some spotted pardalotes often hang out. Now, let's go get ourselves some first photographs of the day.
And here he is, beautiful little spotted pardalote responding to the call. Quite a curious little bird. Very handsome looking specimen. Mature male. And yep, this is exactly how most photographers will get their close-up shots of spotted pardalotes using a call device. And here are some of our spotted pardalote shots from the day. Now let's go get ourselves some birds of prey.
So we've come back in from Connemara National Park into town here. We're currently at the Carra Abattoirs. This is one of my hotspots for birds of prey photography. I run tours here every now and then. And what we're aiming to get today is black falcons. But at the moment we've got a few species floating about. We've got black kites, whistling kites, brown falcons, and the black falcons. Black falcons are sitting up on the power lines behind me, watching very cautiously. Now what we're going to be doing is using my tripod and this camouflage net to set up a little hide. And you're maybe wondering how is that even possibly going to work with birds of prey? They've got such keen eyesight, they're very alert, they're always watching, and they actually sit there and they watch me set this up. But once I'm under the cover and I'm not moving, sitting dead still, they tend to forget that I even exist, and they come and land up in this tree here behind me, and I've been able to get some fantastic shots before. So today we're going to try to get some more of those. While the birds of prey tend to gather here is because there's a rendering plant, and what they do is they dump a bit of the excess render, the stuff that can't be crushed into blood and bone mix, and they just spread it through this paddock here, and all the birds of prey come down and pick up little bits of leftover meat, bits of bone, and they feed from that. So it keeps the local birds of prey species going. Now black falcons are an unbelievable species. They're Australia's least studied bird of prey, and usually they're very hard to find and photograph because they have a tendency to be incredibly nomadic. So they're here one day and the next day they could be 50 to 100 kilometers away in another direction. However, because of the reliable food source that the abattoirs provides, I've been lucky enough to be able to photograph these birds here for the past 3 years. Now let's go set up that hide and see if we can get some shots of them. So here's our little setup. It's nothing too flash, but it's always done the trick for me. I've been using this for years and it's always worked great. Now we've got a whole sky full of birds of prey above us, so everything's looking quite promising. Some days I've been laying in here for 20 minutes and they've come and landed in the tree. Other days I've laid in here for upwards of 4 hours and had no luck at all. But I'm feeling pretty good about today. So let's go ahead and get in our little tent here and get some fantastic shots of some raptors.
And here's a beautiful female black falcon perched up atop the tree, being ever so vigilant. It's relaxed. Beautiful bird they are. And here we have our male black falcon. He's perched right up on the top of the tree. He's having a bit of a preen. And last but not least, we even managed a whistling kite feeding. These guys are quite a big bird. Probably one of my favourite birds of prey. They're a beautiful looking species. Now let's have a look at some of our photographs. Here we have our female black falcon and our male black falcon. a brown falcon, a black kite, and finally a whistling kite. Now on to glossy black cockatoos.
So we're back out in Connemara National Park again. We're about to go track down my favourite species, the glossy black cockatoo. And how we're going to do that is by first identifying their call from a distance, which is this. And trekking through their feeding grounds, which we're currently in. Now this is a landscape dominated by she oak, so Allocasuarina and Casuarina varieties. More predominantly this species right here, which is Allocasuarina diminuta. Now this is the main feed source of the local population of glossy black cockatoos, so they should be around here somewhere. Let's go see if we can find them. I've just located a group of glossies. There's a small group, there's about 6 birds, and what we're going to do is try to get extra close to these guys today. So they're about 70 meters away, and what I like to do is get, say, within 30 meters, drop down on my hands and knees and crawl the rest of the way. Now that ensures that I'm not seen as a threat, and allows me to get super close and get some fantastic photos. Now let's go get those shots, shall we?
And here we have it, a beautiful male glossy black cockatoo feeding on the Allocasuarina diminuta that we mentioned earlier. They do so with expert precision, rotating the cone and extracting the seed from it. Absolutely beautiful animal. You can see why they're my absolute favourite species. Now, let's get on to some editing programs, shall we? So I've just gone ahead and compiled a little list of photography editing programs. So I'm going to start with the mobile phone applications first. Now ToolWiz is a great application. I still use it to this day for its blurring effects, and it really helps to blur the background of an image, for example, and make the subject that's in focus pop a little bit more. It's also got some other great blurring effects like radial blur to make it appear as though a bird is that's flying is spinning. It's got some fantastic capabilities, ToolWiz. It's got some very advanced tools and some very simple tools, as a lot of the other apps do here. Now Aviary is a great starting app for editing. It's quite actually similar to your Instagram editing ability. It's got a lot of filters, but there are those advanced settings as well. Snapseed has a whole range of complex editing abilities and tools. I haven't used it a whole lot, but I know it's definitely worth looking into. Varnist is a great way to turn your photographs into paintings. It's got a whole range of different overlays that will recreate an image as a painting rather than a photograph. I used to use it a lot before I started getting right into Photoshop, and now I use Photoshop to do all my artistic edits and designs, just because it has a whole range more capabilities and you can customize images just that little bit better. Now, background eraser and photo layers is quite similar to Photoshop. I haven't listed Photoshop only because of how complex it is. It's quite hard for me to explain its capabilities. You can literally just do anything with an image if you have the know-how, and there's a lot of YouTube videos that can teach you exactly how to do anything you want. Now, background eraser and photo layers, yeah, it's great. It's sort of like Photoshop simplified, so it gives you the ability to, they're two apps, they're two separate apps. So background eraser gives you the ability to cut an image out of another image, and photo layers gives you the ability to place that cut out image over another photograph. And I used to do that and take these photographs that I'd cut out and relayered back into Varnist and use artistic edits from there. Now, Lightroom is fantastic. It's probably the best, in my opinion, the best editing app there is at the moment, along with Photoshop. We're going to be using that after this little skit here to edit one of our photographs from today. And it's just the capabilities, the tools in it, everything's, it's sort of simple. You will see how it all works in a second, but it can be quite complex as well. Now, Capture One is quite similar to Lightroom. It is, I've heard good things about it. I've seen a few photos edited on it. I just prefer Lightroom. I seem to get better image quality out of Lightroom than I do out of Capture One, but that's just my opinion. So let's move on to Lightroom now and edit a photograph. Okay, welcome to the editing process. We're currently on Adobe Lightroom, which is my favorite photo editing program and one in which I edit all my images. This program is free to download and use on mobile phones with the exclusion of a few advanced settings. However, on PC it requires a subscription, which if I remember correctly is about $13 a month, so not too pricey, and it also gives you access to a range of other Adobe products like the one I'm using to create this video. So before I run you through an intro to editing, I just want to chat to you about why we edit images. First off, editing an image personalizes it and makes it even more your own. After a few uses of editing programs, you'll notice that you adopt your own personal style, which can become recognizable to other photographers and viewers of your work, kind of like a painting style. This also ensures that your work is not stolen, because you'd be able to prove that your work is yours, as you are the only one that has the original copy of the photograph. This means you will have no need to put a watermark on your images, which I think takes away from the image. Now, another reason to edit is to best showcase the species and to realign the quality of the image to that of what we saw in real life, because often a photograph doesn't pick up on all the detail in correct color, and we want the viewers to view the best version of the bird or the animal or whatever it is, the subject you're photographing. Remember, we're trying to bring the animal to them without them having to go find it themselves. So on that note, let's begin the editing process. So I've selected a photograph here of a female glossy black cockatoo. I'm going to go ahead and start on that. Now, the first thing I like to do is to crop an image. Now, cropping allows us to gain a better composition. And there's a little bit too much sky there, so I'm just going to get rid of some of the sky and crop it so that the bird's head's in the top center. Yeah, might drop that down here. So we're going to go with that. Now we're going to go through the editing process now. So I'm going to go through each individual setting with you. First off, we've got lighting settings. So exposure is your light intensity and allows you to correct errors made by using the wrong ISO or the wrong shutter speed. Now this photograph, I like to edit my photographs zoomed right in just so I can get a better idea of the detail. Now, one thing I noticed on this photograph is I've overexposed it. So I've had an ISO that was too high or a shutter speed that was too low for the conditions, and the yellow on the cheek here is turned quite white. It's quite bright, a bit over exaggerated. Now what we're going to use first is the exposure. I'm going to drop that a little bit just to get rid of a little bit of the white there, the excess light. Now next we've got contrast. Now contrast is the color boldness and the shadow boldness. If I zoom out and turn that right up, you'll see that it makes everything a little bit more intense. The blues, the shadows, the light, everything. So I'm going to jump on that, zoom in. It also darkens the eye. We don't want to turn it down, it dulls the image quite a bit. We don't want too much of that. We might actually leave it on -3. Next we've got our highlights, which is quite similar to whites. It's going to affect the area that we want to fix, which is this overexposure in the cheeks. And if I turn that up, it'll intensify. If I turn it down, it'll correct it a bit. So we're going to turn that down a little bit to fix that white. Now next is shadows. A good example of what this does is if I zoom down to this foot here, which is quite dark in the shadow, and I turn the shadows up, you'll see that the foot becomes visible. However, it adds a lot of noise in the image. Now this is what noise is, and you can see a tiny bit in the background. It's this grainy effect, and that's not a good thing to have in an image. I try my best to remove as much noise as I possibly can. I might lift the shadow just a tiny bit so we can brighten up that eye. You can see the color difference between the pupil and the iris. Now next is our whites. And turn that down a little bit just to take a bit of the exaggeration out of that white there. And but we still want to try to keep a little bit of the light reflection off the wings. Now next is our blacks. Now this is the whole bird's quite black. If we lift it up, it's going to brighten the image. Turn it down, it's going to darken those blacks. So we're going to zoom in again to the eye. Just check how this affects that. So I'm going to leave it on -6. Still see the difference there. You can still see the detail on the eye. Now our next setting is color. First off, we've got temperature. So for example, a good way to explain this is if I was to take this, if I had taken this photo, in sun setting light or sun rising light, it would probably appear like this and have that golden hue to it. And so just imagine this setting is back there in the normal and this is the natural color. If we were to turn it towards the blue, it would realign it with the standard color of the bird and the background and give you that nice clean color finish. When we turn it the other way, if the image, for example, was taken in the dark, you'd turn it towards the yellow. Now we're just going to leave that there. We don't need to correct any of the lighting on this. It's quite well balanced. Now tint, I don't play with tint because as you'll see it changes the color of the image. I don't have any use for that. So we're just going to leave that as it is. Next we've got vibrance and saturation. Now they're both pretty similar settings. They both boost the intensity of the coloration on the bird or whatever it is you're photographing, whatever the subject is. And this is where a lot of people tend to make mistakes. So they over colorize the image, over intensify the colors. So someone who's new to editing might look at that and think that looks good, whereas an experienced editor and photographer will know that this is overexposed and too brightly colored. So, but we are going to lift that just a little bit, just to intensify them colors. We shouldn't need to use saturation. Have a look at it anyway. Yeah, we're not going to need to use much of that. We'll just leave it on +2. Now, next we've got our individual color editing. So I like to edit each color individually. Some people think it's too time consuming, but it gives you the ability to change the luminance and colors and the saturation and the hue, which allows you to bring out details that aren't there if you're just editing color as a whole. So we're going to correct the red because the picture is overexposed and that red on the tail is turned a bit orange. So we're going to drop that way. I'm going to boost the saturation just a little bit. And we want the shadow in between the feather layers to stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to drop this down just a little bit, darken it, make them a little bit more obvious. Now orange, there's a bit of an orange glow to the whole bird. So if I change orange, you'll see it affects a lot more. We want it to. So we're going to turn that yellow just because of the feathers on the, actually we'll check the tail. So this is where your selective editing comes in handy. So it's made that quite yellow on the tail. So we're just going to leave that as it is actually. But we are going to be darken the yellow a little bit. I'll just check the tail again with the orange, sorry. Yep, we're going to leave that like that. So it gets rid of a bit of the orange tinge on the face. Now yellow is where we're going to fix our lighting exposure. Now we're going to make it a little bit more golden. And boost that saturation a tiny bit. Now, luminance, so if I turn it that way, you'll see where that exaggeration is. And if I turn it down, you'll notice extra detail comes out. And now that looks a lot more like the natural coloration of the bird. See, there's a lot more detail on the feathers in here. So we're going to go ahead and leave that there. Now green and cyan, we're not going to play with them much because it's going to affect the color on the wings here. And the coloration there is already nice enough. I'm going to boost the saturation actually just a little bit. Both of them. Just bring out a little bit of that wing color. Now last color we're going to play with is the blue. It's going to be the hue of the sky. So we are going to darken the whole thing a little bit. Boost the saturation. I'm going to darken it just to make that bird pop a little bit more. We're not going to bother with them two settings because they're not going to have much of effect on anything. They might change the sky a little bit. So we're going to move on to textures now, the effects of. So we're going to zoom in here again. Oh, have a look at what these do. Now texture. So we don't have a whole lot of noise in the background. There is a little bit. If I boost the texture and the clarity, you're going to see the noise start to become more obvious. Now this will have made the bird appear quite detailed from a distance, but up close, it's a bit of a mess. So I'm going to turn that down a little bit. I'm going to leave it on 14. Now clarity, this will make the bird appear incredibly sharp, very glossy. However, again, you zoom in here, you'll see that noise in the background is quite obvious. It's also dark in the eye. We've lost that detail that we were after. We're trying to retain. So we're going to turn this back about here. Leave it at that. Now dehaze is great for when you've got a bit of light blur in the image. However, when you're editing with blackbirds, it tends to turn the black colors gold and yellow. So we don't want that. You zoom here, look up close. You don't want any dehaze. We'll just leave it on +1. Now vignette. I'm sure many of you know what this setting does. Adds that dark halo or a light halo, which is good in certain photographs, but not when you're photographing in the sky. Tends to bring your attention to the center of the image, being the bird, but we've already got enough attention on this bird, I think. And the vignette is quite obvious against the sky background. Now grain, I don't use this thing. I'll just show you what it does. It tends to make a mess of an image. I don't really know what you use it for. I've never seen it used before in any tutorials. Sharpening. So this will boost the sharpness of the individual pixels. If we turn that up, you'll see it'll make a lot of that in the background. If you zoom out, the image will appear quite detailed, but not up close. And I always try to keep as little noise in a photograph as possible. Just going to leave that where it was. Now noise reduction does get rid of it. However, it tends to a lot of detail out of the bird or the subject in focus. So if I turn this all the way up, the bird become quite painted appearing. Very nice. I'm just going to leave this. I might turn it up. Just tidy up the background the tiniest bit. Now color noise reduction will change the noise, or tidy up the noise in the bright colors, but we don't really need it. It's all looking fine to me. Now our last two settings here, we've got remove chromatic aberration, which I've never had to use. It's never really done anything for my photographs. However, this lens correction is going to make a massive difference. You notice there's, from right to left, there's a dark shadow that gets lighter, disappears about here. There's a sort of a bright glow in the center of the image. We're going to get rid of that with the lens correction because I've made a lighting error somehow, or I might have had a smudge on the lens that has darkened the outside, so that will what happens. Yeah, and we've balanced out the image, the lighting in the image. So next we've got a healing brush. Our healing brush will allow us to, if we wanted to, we could remove this whole branch, but we're not going to. The image is fine as it is. Brush allows you to edit individual areas. So for example, if we wanted to use the color in the yellow just there, or make the head a little bit more detailed, we can do that with the brush. It's like a selective edit. Next we've got linear gradient. Now this is useful for fixing skies over a landscape photograph. We're not going to use it here. And then radial gradient, which is useful for, say, for example, we've got a dark image and we just want to put a little bit extra light on a specific area. We could do that with the radial gradient. So that is a basic run through of the editing tutorial. We're all done here. I'm going to go ahead and show you what the original looked like compared to the finished product. So you see it's quite a lot brighter. There is a little bit of extra exposure there, and there's sort of almost a white haze over the entirety of the image. So we've removed that through our editing process, and we've returned the bird back to the natural appearance that we saw on the day. So we're going to keep it as that, and I'm pretty happy with the finished product. That's it, we're all done the editing process. I hope you learned something from this bit of editing tutorial, and you can use it to and apply your skills learned here on your own photographs and hopefully improve the quality of them. Now we're just going to go to a little message and we'll finish up. Photography is more important today than it ever has been before. We are currently in the midst of a 6th mass extinction event, and photography is one way in which we can bring awareness to and assist in the conservation of species worldwide. Photographs and footage allow us to make the incredible wildlife we share the world with both accessible and relatable to people all around the globe, especially to those who have never or may never get the opportunity to see them in the wild. Today, we live in the age of social media, each spending countless hours scrolling through feeds to keep up with the times. And as wildlife photographers, it is our responsibility to take advantage of such times through our images. By taking and sharing our images, we are able to captivate an audience, which allows us to also educate and inspire positive change for the species photographed. This is why I photograph wildlife, and I hope this video has inspired you to get out there, take some incredible shots, and share the existence of the wondrous animals around you with the world. Thanks for watching. I hope you will learn something today and enjoy the video. Bye-bye.